Very early on, Senator Tom Cotton, a Republican, said that we should consider the possibility that the COVID-19 may have leaked from a biolab. He didn't necessarily, well, that even may be falsely framing what he actually said. I don't want to put words in his mouth. He just basically brought up, look, that it's most likely naturally occurring, but there are certainly some things we should be looking at. We should take this very, very seriously. Well, early on, all of these people in media started screaming conspiracy theories, saying, no, it's not true. They started misrepresenting what he was actually saying. Well, now people are actually entertaining the possibility, and the mainstream media, that the coronavirus may have leaked from a lab. Not that it was a bioweapon, not that it was intentionally released, but that it was an accidental release. The funny thing is, I've talked about this a long time ago. Why? I pay attention to the news. There was a story. It was a study that came out of South China University in Beijing that there is a Chinese Center for Disease Control, like basically across the street from the wet market. They reported they wrote in their study that it's possible that an individual who was researching there on bat coronavirus may have become infected and leaked. Well, now not only do we have the Daily Mail saying, it's no longer being discounted, the Washington Post writes, how did COVID-19 begin? Its initial origin story is shaky. Is the mainstream media now finally entertaining the possibility that this was a major mishap? They actually have an expert, seriously, from a U.S. university, I think from Rutgers or something, pointing out that they were supposed to be using level 4 security. They used level 2. While most people still think it was a naturally occurring thing, the media is starting to come around and entertaining this possibility, which leads me to wonder, will it be another month to where they're finally like, yeah, actually it was, leaked from a lab? The Washington Post writes, the story of how the novel coronavirus emerged in Wuhan, China has produced a nasty propaganda battle between the U.S. and China. The two sides have traded some of the sharpest charges made between the two nations since the Soviet Union falsely accused the CIA of manufacturing AIDS. U.S. intelligence officials don't think that the pandemic was caused by deliberate wrongdoing. The outbreak that has now swept the world instead began with a simpler story, albeit one with tragic consequences. The prime suspect is natural transmission from bats to humans, perhaps through unsanitary markets. But scientists don't rule out that an accident at a research lab in Wuhan might have spread a deadly bat virus that had been collected for scientific study. Good science, bad safety is how Senator Tom Cotton put his theory in a February 16th tweet. He ranked such a breach or natural transmission as more likely than two extreme possibilities: an accidental leak of an engineered bioweapon or a deliberate release. Cotton's earlier loose talk about bioweapons set a furor back when he first raised it in late January and called the outbreak worse than Chernobyl. And he was probably right. And the media dismissed him for it, and they shouldn't have. China dished wild, irresponsible allegations of its own. On March 12th, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman Li Jianzhao charged in a tweet it might be the U.S. Army who brought the epidemic to Wuhan. He retweeted an article that claimed without evidence, I love when they do that, without evidence, shut up, that U.S. troops might have spread the virus when they attended the World Military Games in Wuhan in October 2019. China retreated on March 22nd when Ambassador to the United States, Cui Tianqi, told Axios on HBO that such rumors were crazy on both sides. A State Department spokesman said Chui's comment was welcome, and Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping pledged in a March 27 phone call to focus on cooperative behavior. I'm glad to hear it. I wish China had told us the truth from the beginning. To be clear, U.S. intelligence officials think there's no evidence whatsoever that the coronavirus was created in a laboratory as a potential bioweapon. Solid scientific research demonstrates the virus wasn't engineered by humans and that it originated in bats. This, to the best of my understanding, is true. I've seen other sources and even scientific papers that say it originated in bats. But the question is, was it a breach on accident from, they had a naturally occurring virus they were looking at and it got on an accident? But how did the outbreak occur? Solving this medical mystery is important to prevent future pandemics. What's increasingly clear is that the initial origin story, the virus was spread by people who ate contaminated animals at the Hunan seafood market in Wuhan, is shaky. Scientists have identified the culprit as a bat coronavirus. Through genetic sequencing, bats weren't sold at the seafood market, although that market or others could have sold animals that had contact with bats. The Lancet noted in a January study that the first COVID-19 case in Wuhan had no connection to the seafood market. There's a competing theory of an accidental lab release of a bat coronavirus that scientists have been puzzling about for weeks. Less than 300 yards from the seafood market is the Wuhan branch of the Chinese Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Researchers from the facility and nearby Wuhan Institute of Virology have posted articles about collecting bat coronaviruses from around China for study to prevent future illnesses. Did one of those sample leak, or was a hazardous waste deposited in a place where it could spread? Now, but I'm going to read you this quote from the scientist, but I have to point out something. YouTube has instituted editorial rules for what you can and cannot say, and you cannot defy scientific consensus. That's what they say. What does that even mean? How are you supposed to know what the consensus is? And what if the consensus is wrong? I talked about this a long time ago. Was it consensus because a scientific research paper came out from China? Or was it not consensus because the media was saying it was not true? Well, now the media is saying it is true. You're going to go back and fix all my videos you demonetized when I was talking about this? Probably not. The game that YouTube plays because they're inept and terrified is that they let the media say whatever it wants and whatever they say is true, but whatever their own homegrown creators say must be false. Congratulations, YouTube. You're hurting your own content. Richard Ebright, a Rutgers microbiologist and biosafety expert, told me in an email the first human infection could have occurred as a natural accident, with the virus passing from bat to human, possibly through another animal. But Ebright cautioned that it could also have occurred as a laboratory accident, with, for example, an accidental infection of a laboratory worker. He noted that bat coronaviruses were studied in Wuhan at biosafety level 2, which provides only minimal protection compared with the top biosafety level 4. Ebright described a December video from the Wuhan CDC that shows staffers collecting bat coronaviruses with inadequate personal protective equipment and unsafe operational practices. Separately, I reviewed 2 Chinese articles from 2017 and 2019 describing the heroics of Wuhan CDC researcher Tian Junhua, who, while capturing bats in a cave, forgot to take protective measures so that bat urine dripped from the top of his head like raindrops. And that's what was reported from South China University in Beijing. Washington Post now corroborating essentially just that much. Now, I don't know if he's quoting the individual. No, I think he's actually writing himself, the writer of the Washington Post article. So everybody who then tried to discount this hypothesis, so what? They were espousing fake news. Their absurd skepticism held us back from what we now know to be likely, or possible, I should say. And then there's the Chinese study that was curiously withdrawn. In February, a site called ResearchGate published a brief article by Batao Zhao and Lei Zhao from Guangzhou's South China University of Technology. In addition to origins of natural recombination and intermediate host, the killer coronavirus probably originated from a laboratory in Wuhan. Safety level may need to be reinforced in high-risk biohazardous laboratories, the article concluded. Batao Zhao told the Wall Street Journal in February that he had withdrawn the paper because it was not supported by direct proofs. Accidents happen, human or laboratory. Solving the mystery of how COVID-19 began isn't a blame game, but a chance for China and the United States to cooperate in a crisis and prevent a future one. Well, I'm not entirely convinced that we can ever completely normalize and, fix relations with China. Things have been shaky and it's been getting worse. While I like the idea of us repairing relationships, I'm not sure I trust the Chinese government. But this story shows us something else. The dangers of pathetic, inept, incompetent media with an inability to actually research this. This is sort of an addendum to the segment I did on my main channel where I talked about the politicizing of the coronavirus pandemic. Because anything Trump says must be wrong. Because anything a Republican says must be wrong. They immediately smeared and discounted what Tom Cotton had been saying, what Trump had been saying. Only for a month or two later to come out and say, oops, yep, it was true. Now here we are. Republicans, conservatives, moderates, independent media were talking about this exact thing last month. And the media said it was fringe nonsense. YouTube deranked and demonetized content that brought it up. Now what? The Washington Post is saying, we actually verified some of this might be legit. So now what? Do we have to wait 2 months for confirmation on every story because the mainstream media doesn't know how to do their jobs? Because they don't know how to do a simple Google search before just yelling at someone saying you're wrong? How amazing is it that Tom Cotton, Republican, looked into this, said, hey, this makes sense, and the media, without evidence, said he was crazy. Perhaps if they took the 2 seconds to actually look into the claims he was making, they would have found, oh, there is some veracity to this. If we react to every crisis based on the media's skepticism and constant orange man bad narrative, we're not going to react properly to real problems. It's probably why we are where we are today. But I'll leave it there. Thanks for hanging out. I will see you all tomorrow at 10 a.m. on this channel. And yeah, I'll see you then.